Well, hi, my name is Keren Kalif. I teach here in the computer science school. I teach C++. I also teach in Afeka College for Engineering. I'm a staff member there. And I also teach there the C++ in another version than I teach here. And what I want to tell you about is how I give them the assignment in the other course that I give there. So the title of my lecture is When the Students Write the Assignment of the Course. And first I want to tell you about the students that I teach there. They are third and fourth year students, that this is an elective course for them. So they choose this course. It's not a mandatory course. And what they have learned so far by the time they come to my course is introducing to computer science, but they learn it in Java. They've already learned object-oriented in Java, and they've learned a C course. So when they come to my course, this is the second course that they study object-oriented. So it's not as the course that I teach here that is the first time they get to learn object-oriented. So I can do some different stuff. What kind of assignment they've done so far by the time they come to my course? Solving problems. In most of programming courses, they get assignment. Please write a function that does something. Or please implement a system, and they get a system definition that they need to solve. The project I give them is totally different. The project is divided to 4 parts. The first part is that they need to write an object-oriented story. They write the word of their problem, and each team writes a story. The specification of the story, as the story needs to include 3 inheritance class, which one of them should be multiple, 2 classes with dynamic allocations. I know yesterday we talked about do we want dynamic allocations or not. I do want them to practice dynamic allocation, as this is only the second course they write in C, and they're not good in dynamic allocations. I want them to be good. 2 classes with arrays, and at least 1 class that contains another class. They need to overload at least 5 operators in addition to the assignment operator. Total a story of 10 classes. In addition to all that, they need to define which 8 main methods they are going to have in the main, functions in the main. OK, my conclusion after that part, after they wrote the story, it's not easy for them to write a story. They are used to have a problem and solve it. Now I tell them, OK, define your own problem. And they, oh, I don't have enough classes. Is it containment? Is it a pointer? It's not that easy for them. It's the first time they do that. And apparently, after they write it, while they write this story, I see it clarify some object-oriented stuff for them. They write a story, they think something it's containment, then we see it's inheritance, they think it's inheritance, we see it's containment, and only when they struggle into it, they understand the difference. And if it was the first course they learn object-oriented, they wouldn't have the ability to do that. Another thing that is clarifying when they write the story is pointer vo containment. In Java, they don't have a difference. So they don't understand, is it a content class, is it a pointer? And while we are writing the story and help them during this process, they can better understand of that difference. Many of them don't declare the managing class. If somebody writes a hospital system, they do in the main all the vector array of doctors, array of nurses, array of patients. They don't understand they need a hospital class. They don't understand that a main is a specific test of their system. And if they do all the arrays in the main, if somebody else wants to test their project, their code, he needs to recode everything that they did in the main. So they now understand they need a main class, a managing class. In order for them to write the story, because this is the first assignment of the course, before I teach anything, I need to give them complete some gaps. Because they already know object-oriented, so they know inheritance, but they don't know few stuff that are in C++ or not in Java. First thing I need to clarify pointer vo containment. I give them the example of if I have a battery and a cell phone, what is the difference if I define it as a battery pointer or a contained battery. And the other thing that I need to teach them about multiple inheritance, because we have it in C++. By the end of this part, they can go to part 2 only after I approve their story. I almost never approve the story at the first shot they write me the story. We make sometimes 4 to 5 iterations till I approve their story, because they write it in a document, and they need to write it and clarify, oh, and not tell me, oh, but I meant that. It needs to be very, very well defined in the word, and soon you're going to understand why. And I also ask them to add a class diagram for them to make orders so they understand how many classes they have. And that was the first part. This is they do in the 3 weeks of the semester while I start teaching all the C++. After I approve this story, they can move to part 2. Each team wrote a story. Now each team codes only the headers of their story. Only the headers. The specifications, as they need to code the age and the main, and their project should compile, but it can't link because they don't have the implementations. They are not allowed to write the implementations in this part. And in addition, they are not allowed to use STL and class string, even though if they know it. I haven't taught them it by this point. They are not allowed because I want them to practice dynamic allocations. Common mistakes when I check this part when they only call the H files and the main. They don't declare integer for the array size because they don't implement it. So when they only write the header, they don't think that they need a size for the arrays. And they mostly forget the triple copy constructor, assignment operator, and distractor because they don't run, so they don't see it, crashes, and etc. And it's a mistake not declaring them in classes that have dynamic allocations. Later, OK? Another thing they need to clarify in that point, that if they have a pointer in the class, it doesn't automatically need that they have the triple, because I might have a pointer that is not dynamic allocated. So they need to understand the difference. Their challenge is that. Because they write a code, they compile, but they have no idea if it works. They only know it compiled. And it's very hard for them to be in the dark and don't know if it works. Few of them even code all the code just in order to be sure. But soon they are going to discover that it was a lot of waste of time. Because then we get to part 3. In part 3, they need to implement what they didn't do in part 2. But
can I guess?
No, because you know. So this was part 1 and part 2. Each team wrote a story and coded the headers. Now they put all their code in a shared folder. What happens in part 3 is this. Each team needs to implement the CPP of another team. They are not allowed to choose their own project. They hate me. But I tell them that at the beginning of the semester, but they don't understand that this time is really going to arrive.
That's not the way. You just switch the implementation the other team.
No. In this part, they are still not allowed to use STL and the class string. The advantages of doing it this way, that they don't implement their own story. That's the first time in their studies, they don't work on their own code. They read other people, other programmers' code. Why is it important? Because the code they read so far is their code, which they know, and lectures code, which is usually excellent. This is the first time they get to read the code that is not that well. And only when you see stuff that are not that good, you start to learn things and have your ideas what is good and what is not. Okay? So this is the time they get to criticize other people's code and understand what is good and what is not good. And then I get emails, Keren, all other projects are so bad. I want to implement my project. And then I said, no, handle that. Another thing is that I don't tell them which project to choose. They need to shop in that shared folder. And what usually happens that 50% of the class choose one specific project. It's usually of a team that the name starts with an A. It took me a few years to understand it because it's a shared folder, and they hand it by their name. So Adam, which is in A, is usually most chosen since they shop it, but they read the project by the order. They saw two projects, and then they chose one because they won't pass now on 20 projects to decide. It's interesting because after I told the class that this is what they do in that semester, they didn't choose the one that starts with A. They chose it randomly. Now we get to part 4. So in part 3, they implemented the code of another team without STL, and now I allow them in part 4 to rewrite the code using STL. Each team implements its own code of part 3. So they keep on their project. I can totally ask them to do it of another team, but I've abused them enough so far in this course. And the common mistakes they have in this part. They forget to remove size over arrays, because if they use the vector, they have a size and capacity, and they forget to remove it. And they forget to remove copy constructor, destructor, and assignment operator. And of course, when I check the project, I remove points, and then they say, so what? It still works? I hate hearing, but it works. They don't understand two things. That somebody else is going to maintain their code later on. They always think that they are the sole people that are working on their project, and they are the only one in this world. They don't understand there is a day after the day they finish working in their company. They think they're always students, so they see it only in that content. So when somebody comes to maintain this code in 2 years, when they are going to be in another company that will pay them a lot more, is going to, if he adds another attribute, and they see there is no pointer to the class, is not going to think there is copy constructor, destructor, and assignment operator, and it's going to be hard to maintain. In addition, they don't understand that the programmer that is going to come after them, if he needs to learn the code, is going a lot to read. And then they say, so what, it's not me. They don't understand that this time is money. And they don't care because they don't pay the salaries. So I tell them, in 10 years, when you are going to be the one that pays the salaries, you don't want your programmers to write a code that does these problems, because they are so, they think they're going to be students all the time. They don't understand that there is a process, and we want them to be good for the programs after them to be good. Difficulties they have in all that process. Usually, dynamic allocations, because they come only after one C course. It doesn't fit for them well, the dynamic allocation, so they struggle it here, and that's why I want them to struggle it in here. Const, they don't understand what is this const. They come after Java. What you want with that const, they don't understand that const is a contract. Because they say, if I don't write const or I don't use it anywhere, everything works good. And I tell them it's a contract. When I read other programmers' code and I see that something is passed by reference, how do you know if it's passed by reference for efficiency or because I really want to change it? Okay? I want to declare a variable that is not going to be changed, but it can't have all the methods, so I need the const. As I said before, one of the problems is they don't understand that they need a manager class. This is one of the difficulties. And they don't see the whole picture as I have just explained. All they see is now that they are students, they need to write an assignment. They don't see that there is a whole world of stuff behind that. But there are some advantages teaching this course after Java. I must say, in Afeka, 8 years ago, the head of the software engineer school decided to pass from a C basic class to Java. I was the main opponent for that move. Now, 8 years later, I can say it was okay. Because when I teach the C++ course now as an elective course, after they've already learned Java, I see there are some advantages in this course when I teach them. Because they have better understanding of some features because the second time they learned object-oriented. And I can also compare everything to how it is in Java. There are many abilities in C++ they did not have in Java. And they, firstly, of course, hate C++ because what is all dynamic allocations? Why do I need to handle it? They come from the easy Java, so here suddenly they need to work. And each time I show them, you see, here you can control, you do a dynamic link, static link, it's very efficient, it's more efficient. And they say, who write that? I say, if you're going to write something that needs efficiency, you're going to use the C++. So they have better understanding of the concepts here than students that learn C++ as first object-oriented course. This is from my experience. I didn't investigate it or something. It's just what I feel. They have better understanding of reference view pointers. And the performance, because we can compare it to other language that they already know. Performance usually for them comes the static binding and in the dynamic binding, and then on the objects declare on the stacked view dynamic allocated. But most important thing in that course is there are some advantages for me as the lecturer of the course. First advantages, I don't need to rewrite the assignment each semester. I have the specification each semester. I give them, and that's all. But the better part of this assignment is that after they write the stories, I can use their stories for assignment in other courses that I give. I don't need every semester to think all by myself. Of course, I write it in a better way, but I have a lot of bunch of ideas of stories that I want that I can give. So this is the elective course that I teach. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Yes.
Don't you encourage them to encapsulate all the array allocation in a class, sort of implementing their own vector?
OK, in part 4, it's already after they've learned templates, so they can do it there.
Or use STD containers.
And no, OK, I forgot to tell. I asked them in part 4 to write linked list by their own, and one of the containers to use their own linked list in order to put templates in this assignment. Forgot to say, sorry. Yes?
One of the important issues in software engineering is reuse. How much reuse are they doing of stories from previous lectures?
Oh, since I'm the only one who teaches that course, I remember because they cannot really write the same story. There are always someone who writes college, restaurant, cinema, but it will always be a little bit different.
Then be college, then university, then high school.
Nobody wrote high school, you know? And not the university, only college. That's interesting. Yes?
Just asking, when you tell them not to choose, is there a reason to tell them that you don't tell them which project they have to take?
I don't tell them.
Why?
I want them to shop.
Why?
I don't want them that if they get a bad project, I don't want to be the one they can blame. I blame them. You chose that story. You can choose another one. You can start. You don't like it.
There could be a benefit from taking a bad one. They can have a benefit.
But I don't want them to feel that they got that. כאילו דפקתי אותם. I don't want them to feel that. They suck themselves. Okay? But I think it's good for them to read and decide what is good at one time because I want them to be.
And you let them take a few groups can take the same.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Definitely. More questions? Yes.
Do you have any plans or do you have any procedure of updating your courses to the new C++?
I enter during the course in few points the new stuff, and always few lessons are missing. But yes, in each year I enter extra and extra code stuff. Yes.
I wanted to congratulate you for taking their projects as assignments in other course. It reminds where a company hired kids to play games of shooting airplanes, and at the end they found that they were really fighting in real war.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oops.